starters, you can't actually see a true mortgage credit report until you have it ran. And so it can differ immensely. So that's the obvious glaring one right off the bat. But I think beyond that, a lot of times there's things that you wouldn't consider are going to be an issue that actually might be, right? And you're asking somebody to loan you hundreds of thousands of dollars. They need to make sure that you can repay it, and sometimes that means considering things that you wouldn't have thought are part of the process, right? And so
student debt, deferred student debt, that you still have to take that into account.
yeah, and so it's just, there's so many pieces to this that it's not just, oh, I have good credit, I'll qualify. Well, how are you paid? When did you start your job? How long have you been working there? Do you have a 2-year history if you've got some kind of irregular pay?
Are you self-employed?
Yeah, there's just this is based on credit, income, and assets. That's what your approval is going to be based on. If your lender's not looking at that stuff intensely up front, things could be missed. So not only can you miss things and not know what you're supposed to be looking for, but if they're not thorough enough on the front end, your lender could also miss things. So
I've
you
seen
just want to make sure.
They qualify them. They're like, they just run credit and get some basic information. They don't confirm their income. They don't look at tax returns. And then once they get under contract and they're getting further along, they're like, oh, you're self-employed and you write off like 80% of how much you make. So instead of showing that you make $100,000, you're actually showing you're only making 20.
Yeah.
But you think they think they're making 100,000 because that's their take home. But what really counts is what the actual tax return shows.
Yeah. It's tough. We have a certain way that the business has to be conducted, how we have to review these items, and it's not going to be the way that you naturally commonly think about it every time. So
yeah, and on the flip side of that, it's funny because like sometimes people that have credit hurdles think they're good to go, and then you turn around and you qualify somebody that thinks they don't have great credit and their credit's in their 700s, and they think that just because they don't have any debt, but they think for whatever reason they can't qualify, and they're stellar. So sure. You have both extremes, right?
Yeah. I think that really kind of highlights the use of things like Credit Karma. That it really can hurt you more than it can help you if you're using that as a solid foundation instead of like a ballpark, right? Because you don't know. Every creditor that's allowed to pull credit will pull a different type of credit report for the transaction it's needed for. So even if you had an auto pull, your score could vary 40 points, different from a mortgage pull. So there's just every company that sets up to have credit reports ran, they give the specifications on how they want it ran, what parameters they're looking for. And so as you run this stuff, you just have to know that unless you're shopping for a mortgage and you've already had your credit pulled by a mortgage pull, you may not have an accurate handle on what your credit looks like.
Yeah,
so
that's a huge issue that we see. Not all credit pulls are the same.
Yeah.
What are the biggest hurdles you have when dealing with veterans in the process or at the beginning?
Yeah, there's probably a few. I would say some of the biggest revolve around what we think things should be versus what things actually are, right? So I've got a guy just yesterday, he's pre-approved with a big national bank right now, and he wanted to get a second opinion. And he sent me over tax returns. He's got a rental property and didn't claim any of the rental income, but all of the expenses. And so all of a sudden, I realized, oh, this other bank didn't look at tax returns because they wouldn't have pre-approved him for this because there's no way, right? And so he was mad up front, and understandably so, because someone has already told him he's good to go. But I think kind of walking into the process expecting things to go one way, it rarely does it go the way that you want it to go. And so people can get frustrated and they want to jump ship and go to a different lender because you give them bad news, or I think at the end of the day, if you walk into the process just expecting that this is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably not going to get everything that you want, and so dealing with expectations that aren't met, extremely frustrating, especially when you think, man, I've been working on my financial situation, I've been paying down my debt, fixing my credit, I'm good to go. And you may have missed something, or maybe things aren't exactly as you thought they were on your credit, and so I think expectations is a huge one. Just managing those, you have a lot of subconscious expectations as you walk into this. You don't even realize, oh man, I'm already thinking this is going to go this way. Yeah. And then it doesn't, and then you've got disgruntled people.
And that's why I think for me, it's so important to have that buyer consultation and to walk them through the process. I have a video on my channel that's called the buyer timeline. So it breaks down, it's very rudimentary, but it's a visual, and it really breaks down everything that has to happen. A lot of buyers will complain and say, why are they asking me for this, all this information? Mm-hmm. They're upset because it's intrusive. And, finances is one of the most uncomfortable things to have to talk about. But sure. It's necessary, because if you know what to expect, then it makes the process easier. And I always steal this phrase from one of the agents that worked in one of my last offices, and she used to say, there's always going to be a bump in the road. So just sure. Expect that. So there's always going to be that hurdle, but I totally agree. What are the most common mistakes you see with veterans as far as buying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably omitting information. They don't intentionally try to, keep it out, but just thinking, oh, that's not relevant. That's not relevant to me buying a house. Some of that we've tried to circumvent. We have a whole questionnaire we send out up front just to kind of ask some of those uncomfortable questions that need to be broached. There's a lot of legality about how we can ask certain questions and things we have to stay away from. So it's kind of hard to navigate that sometimes, right? Having conversations about a divorce or a bankruptcy, some of that stuff's going to show up on credit, some of it's not, but at the end of the day, I think that if veterans can understand, and let me back up. One of the hardest part is, as veterans, we don't trust anybody, because like I said before, we're used to people trying to screw us over. So you got to trust the people that you're working with, the lender and the agent. If you can trust them, then that means that you understand and know without a doubt they're in your corner trying to make this happen for you. If you can come to that conclusion with the people you're working with, great, because then we can have these conversations, and it's basically, you tell me everything and I'm gonna try to make this thing work. If you can't have that conversation because you can't trust who you're working with, then you probably need to take a step back and reevaluate who you're working with, because this is an arduous process. This is not always fun. There is going to be at least a bump in the road. The bumpiest part should be on the front end, right? Mm-hmm. If it's smooth on the front end with the lender that you're working with, that means they're probably not asking the tough questions up front, which means it's going to blow up later. Let's get that stuff out of the way up front. Be patient to work through all of the junk that's going to come up, as we're trying to get pre-approved to get you ready to buy that house. Be patient, embrace that. And then once you get through, the hard stuff should be done up front. That's generally the way it should go. Obviously, there's stuff that pops up that you don't know, you couldn't see, nobody knew. Fine. But I think embrace that process by working with people that you trust.
And that's the other thing I tell people when they think, oh, I want to buy a house, but I don't want to buy for another year. And then I say, well, get your credit pulled anyway. Because sure. If you've got time, no matter what shows up on your credit report, you have the time to deal with it.
Yeah.
A lot of people stick their head in the sand, and then they decide to buy when they have to, not when they want to. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes very challenging. So even if I tell people, even if you're thinking about buying 1 or 2 years out, pull your credit now, because you don't know what's on there. Stuff might be on there that's not even yours, and you can fix it but it's going to take you time.
Sure.
Well, that's great. I think that's great information. What is the one piece of advice you would give a veteran up front?
I would say there's two that are probably equally weighted. You got to find somebody that's competent and trustworthy, right? You got to find somebody who knows what they're doing and does well with that knowledge, right? So that's one big piece. And the other big piece is to not shy away from the difficult stuff, right? If you know you've got crap going on your credit or in your past, embrace that and you know, swallow it and say, let's just see where we land, because you never know. You never know where you might end up. I'll leave you with this kind of a really cool story. I got a guy off Facebook who has a credit score under 580. I think it's like a 573. We just closed him at the beginning of the month, September 4th, with a 573 credit score. You know, I won't give too much information, but he lost his wife a couple years ago and really just kind of tucked himself in a hole to deal with it. Completely understandable. Through that time, wasn't paying his bills. But, you know, eventually he kind of started to work through it, got back up on his feet, took responsibility for his financial situation and fixed it. His credit hasn't recovered, but he doesn't have anything on his credit for the last 2 years. It's clean. No late payments, no derogatory, no nothing. But he's still at a 573. He reached out to me reluctantly on Facebook and said, hey, you know, I've been trying this. I've just been hitting dead end after dead end. Nobody will work with me. Can you help me? And I said, well, let's take a look. And, you know, it was probably 39 days after we started talking that he was closing on his home and now living in his home for almost a month, you know. And so
Awesome.
Uncomfortable to face that stuff, you know, and to be honest, there was at least 2 conversations where he's in tears because he's having to, you know, recall some of that stuff. But he couldn't be more happy, you know, and he's been so appreciative and so thankful. And for me, that's my why. You know, I love helping people that everyone else tells no, but just know that he wouldn't have gotten there if he wasn't willing to kind of just face it, and if he wasn't willing to trust me that I'm there to help him achieve his goals. So that's what I would say. You really just got to embrace the suck, play the game. If you've been in the military, you know, like the Army, it finally took me 1.5 years to figure out, but it was okay. Got to play their game, and I'll make it out all right. You know, and really, mortgage is no different. No, it's no different at all. So play the game.
Yeah, I tell people there's a saying in Spanish, todo tiene remedio menos la muerte. And that is, everything has a solution except for death. So as long as we're alive, we can fix things.
Sure.
You know, there's a remedy to everything. So, well, that's great advice. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate your time. I will put your contact information in the link on the video. So if anybody out there is curious or is ready to buy, give Jeff a call. He's your man. And if you have any questions about real estate in El Paso or anywhere in the country, feel free to reach out to me as well. I will put my information for my Facebook and my webpage in the links below as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Bye, guys.
See you.